पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर्द्यौ शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिराप शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौ शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om.
Nirvana Shaktam on page 39.
Om Satoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Today we celebrate the birthday of Shankaracharya. Normally we celebrate it on the nearest Sunday because traditionally the birthdays are observed according to the lunar calendar. It so happens that according to the lunar calendar, his birthday does fall today. So that's nice that we are able to celebrate his birthday on the very day it's being celebrated in other parts of the world. And most of you are aware, Shankaracharya, or Shankara as it is called for short. Acharya is the title that's given. So his parents, when they named him, they called him Shankara. And because he's an Acharya, the name became Shankaracharya. Like Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma was not his first name. That was the title bestowed upon him as a matter of respect. So the benefit, why do we observe the birthdays of these great ones? The benefit of remembering these great ones at least once a year and studying their lives and teachings is primarily three things. First is inspiration, education, and then action. So oftentimes we find that these great exemplars, great models, through their lives, through their teachings, they show us how to live. They show us how to find a way out of our present existential situation. The stress, the anxiety, the worry, the fear that we all dwell under. And we are all trying to find ways to overcome these, to go beyond these. And through the lives of these great ones, we find guidelines, we find hope, we find inspiration. So inspiring as these lives are, sometimes we should be careful not to limit it only to inspiration, because inspiration comes and goes. It's a little bit like we send out these Swami Vivekananda's quotes every day, a small little quote, and goes literally to thousands of people all over the world. And some days, as it happened a few days ago, when we didn't have Wi-Fi for a long time here, and 2 or 3 days the daily quotes got missed. And I got a barrage of emails from saying, where are those quotes? In fact, I don't know where this person is located, in which part of the globe. I got one email scolding me, saying, I'm in dire need of these quotes. You have no idea what a difficult situation I'm passing through, and these quotes bring me power, which was kind of nice to hear that. On the other hand, just felt a little sad too, that I'm just dependent on this one quote. Partly because all of these quotes come from material which is already available on the internet, online. So it's possible to, if this quote doesn't come one day, just put Vivekananda in the Google search and you'll find lots of material to read. So I mention this only to show that this one quote which comes daily might bring us inspiration. Our entire life shouldn't be so dependent on this one quote that in absence of it, we just feel rudderless. We feel like, what am I going to do today? And so our inspiration should become a little bit more stable. And then that will become stable, that will become more strong, only if we learn from what these quotes say. So otherwise, it's not very difficult, it's not too different from just popping some kind of a power pill, just take a vitamin for your day's needs of vitamins, and then you feel then next day you're ready for another pill to pop in your mouth for energy, or a cup of coffee, for instance. So these quotes are not simply to kind of just bring us energy to get through the day, and then we get ready next day for another quote. We must imbibe these quotes, and that needs education. We must learn from it. Learn from it in such a way that what message I may get from some quote or some incident, it somehow transforms me. First, it helps me intellectually to understand, and then third thing, as I said, is action. It somehow then helps me build my life according to it. Because ultimately, as Swami Vivekananda said, an ounce of practice is worth 100 tons of theory. So you might read books and books and books, but unless and until even a little bit of it has not been put into practice, unless and until a little bit of it has not changed me, made me a better person in some way, all of this reading and all of this listening to lectures would be useless. And so that's the reason we find these birthdays of the great ones as good opportunities to reflect a little bit on their life and teachings. Shankaracharya is considered an incarnation of Shiva. It just so happened that his parents named him Shankara, which is also one of the names of Shiva. The meaning of Shiva and Shankara are not that very different. Shiva literally in Sanskrit means auspicious. And Shankara, Sham means something which is good, which is auspicious. Kara, one who brings about something good in life. So the doer of good, or the doer of auspicious things. Now, when we use words like incarnation, acharya, that's the natural human tendency to categorize people and things. And therefore, in the religious world, we find prophets, saviors, incarnation, saints. Now, these are very fluid categories. The same person might be seen by a section of people as an incarnation. Some others may see the same person as a saint. It really, in the ultimate analysis, doesn't matter what label you attach to the person. What really matters is what that person means to us, how we are inspired by that person, what we learn from that person, and how it changes our lives. All of these labels that we attach to these great ones are a recognition that something of the vibhuti is seen in their life. Now, vibhuti is a Sanskrit word. In the Gita, an entire chapter 10, is dedicated, which is called Vibhuti Yoga. It's a way of divine splendor. And this is the verse that comes in the Gita. Yadyat vibhuti mat sattvam shrimad urjitam evava tattadeva avagachatvam mama tejomsha sambhavam. There are three words here in Sanskrit. Vibhuti mat. Vibhuti mat means great. Shrimat means prosperous. And urjitam, which means powerful. In other words, whatever is great, prosperous, and powerful is a part of the divine light. Now, when the greatness, prosperity, and power manifest in a material context, we see that they shine for a while and then it disappears. But when these three, greatness, prosperity, and powerful, and prosperity is not necessarily always material prosperity. For instance, there is a goddess of wealth in the Hindu tradition called Lakshmi. And oftentimes people look at Lakshmi always bestowing wealth. But wealth itself is of two kinds. There is the external wealth, which everyone understands, measured in terms of dollars. But there is the internal wealth. All these great qualities and virtues, the values, truthfulness, honesty, unselfishness, that's inner wealth. And so Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, so it depends. We can ask for prosperity, we can ask for wealth, but are we asking for an inner prosperity, inner wealth or external wealth? That's a choice different people make. So when these three, prosperity, greatness and power are manifest through spiritual personalities, they last for a long time. In fact, their glow increases with time, and we remember these personalities centuries later and adore them. And Shankaracharya, among many of these great ones, all the great ones whose sayings and words you find all along the wall, and whose festivals that are observed in different places of worship, in different traditions the world over, all of these are these great ones who continue to inspire us, who continue to guide us even today. So Shankaracharya, so Acharya is one of those categories. Now, who is an Acharya? Who can be called an Acharya? There is a Sanskrit verse which gives the definition of one who is fit to be called an Acharya. The Sanskrit verse goes like this: Achinoti shastrani achare sthapayatyapi swayam acharate yascha tam acharyam prachakshate. Which means an Acharya is one who knows the scriptures, lives according to them, and works to make them practicable in life. So, three things. First of all, for someone to be called an Acharya, that person must know the scriptures. Knowing them is not enough. One must live according to them. One's life must be built according to the teachings in the scriptures. And third, one must be able to teach. One must be able to make it practicable. One must make it real, not only in their own lives, but in the lives of people around them. Now, such a person, therefore, is called an Acharya. And because Shankara, who lived in the 8th century, that is almost now more than 1200 years ago, had these qualities in a fullest measure. So he is considered one of the great acharyas in the Vedanta tradition. Vedanta has had many acharyas, and so among the prominent amongst them, you may have heard the names of Ramanujacharya. He's also called Ramanujacharya. Madhva. Madhva is often considered one of the leading philosophers of the Dvaita, the dualistic tradition within Vedanta. Ramanuja is considered a leader among the qualified non-dualist tradition called the Vishishta Advaita. And Shankara is considered, he's one of the earliest among these three, is considered the major exponent of the Advaita, a non-dualistic school of philosophy. The greatness of Shankara is that every great acharya, every great teacher, every great philosopher in the Indian subcontinent who came after him has either had to agree with him or disagree with him. You could not ignore him. So you could not pretend as if he didn't exist. And so that's why Shankara has this kind of a prominent place, because everyone who comes after him, they have to say they belong to Shankara's party or not. And that's kind of a way, putting it very crudely, but that's essentially. So he's someone who could not be ignored. Now, what's the background? We also know that these great ones, they don't just drop in a vacuum. Every great personality on the face of this earth is a product of his or her times. And they grow in that social milieu. But such is the power of their life and their teaching that they are able to outgrow and transcend the limitations of that period. And that's why their teachings continue to be relevant, not only to people during his or her time, but also to centuries later on. Now, what was the context in the 8th century in India where Shankara was born? That was the time when the Mimamsakas were on the decline. Now, Mimamsakas is at the school of philosophy in the Vedanta tradition, which are primarily the ritualists. And they were on the decline because of the rise of Buddha, the Buddha who came nearly 5 centuries before the Common Era. He saw that ritualism had taken such hold of the mind. In itself, rituals are great, provided they are done in the way they ought to be done. But such is human nature that sometimes we cling to the externals and ignore the internals. Now, externals are important provided there is internal. It's a little bit like um, like beautifying one's exterior. Well, that's great. That's wonderful. Nothing wrong with it. But if the inside is ugly, inside is ignored, then that external beauty has no value. But if one takes care to present oneself beautifully externally while also being careful that the inner beauty, the inner strength is not ignored, then that's fine. Now, rituals have this great power to change our lives. Rituals are a tremendously powerful practice. But because rituals are something that are to be done, uh, sometimes people might just do them but ignore the inner practice that goes along with it. Now, a puja that we do at the center, for instance, the special days, the puja you can see, and all of you have attended many pujas. There's a lot of things that are done externally. There is offering of flowers, there is incense, it's kind of can be very colorful, fragrant, there's a lot of prasad. Now, all these are external things, wonderful. What should not be ignored, that even when these external things are being done, a lot of things is going on internally. A puja or external rituals are a way of connecting with the divine. And if all the time focused on is just these externals and completely ignoring the internal, then there's a big problem. But that is what the Buddha saw. That when the Buddha came on the scene, he saw that these rituals had become so rampant and people were engaged in them, but they were ignoring the inner soul. And so he wanted to break that habit. And so he emphasized the changing the inner life and said, stop all these external rituals. There's no point in mechanically doing these things. Focus on the internal. And sometimes what happens is when you want to make a point of something, you emphasize that thing. But sometimes that thing can get emphasized so much in the minds of the people that the purpose for which that emphasis was laid gets lost. It's, in brief, what we say, throwing the baby with the bathwater. So because Shankara said, when Buddha said, rituals, stop these rituals, look upon this inner thing, people did the most simplest thing. They stopped the rituals and did not look at the inner thing as well. So that's what had happened. By the time Shankara came, which was almost 1200 years after Buddha, by which time rituals had been kind of discarded, because that's why the Mimamsakas were in the decline. And those who took this only a part of the Buddha's teachings, give up rituals, did not completely take the other part, like look in the interior. And so one of the great challenges before Shankara was then how to bring back that balance, how to restore to the shift away from the Vedic rituals and bringing them and back to putting them in the right place. So, and this is how the religious history especially, but actually even in social history and even economic history always moves. There is always just the nature of things, that there are things decline, and then some great person comes. There is a need for course correction. There is need for a reform. So this person comes, kind of lifts it up. In order to lift it up, this person has to emphasize certain things. And sometimes in the minds of the people, that gets overemphasized, and then things become better and they start decline again. And then you need another reformer to come, and it comes again and it declines again. Which is why Krishna said in the Gita that again and again, the divine power needs to descend from time to time in order to do this course correction. And which is why in the Vedantic tradition, they accept this idea of the divine descent, the avatars, that many avatars, that God's power can come down often in order to help the nature of humanity, which just doesn't want to remain in one place. It just goes up and down, up and down. So Shankara was born in the year 788 of the Common Era on the bank of the river called Purna in a place called Khaladi in the present day Kerala, the southernmost state in India. 788. In 1988, exactly 1200 years later, they had a big 1200th birthday of Shankara celebrated all over India, especially. And I was in Madras then, and I was able to participate in the program in the presence of the great Shankaracharya of Sringeri. So Shankara started 4 major monasteries in 4 corners of India. And so that was a great celebration in 1988. Shankara's father's name was Shivaguru. His mother's name was Aryamba. They were born in he was born in a prosperous, learned, religious Brahmin family. He was the one group of Brahmins in Kerala called Nambudris. So he was born in that Nambudri Brahmin family. A story is told that his parents had a vision before the child was born. And Shiva appeared before them and made them this rather interesting offer. So Shiva said, a son will be born to you, but what kind of a son you want? Well, not many of us get that choice. So Shiva gave this choice and said, do you want a genius who is short-lived or an ordinary child with a long life? Just think about it. If you get a choice like this, what kind of a choice would you make? Well, his parents said, we want a genius. And so a genius was born. There are lots of stories in Shankar. One of the things in when we look at these lives, and I think especially in the Eastern tradition, partly I imagine because of the idea of history in Eastern tradition is a little bit different from history in the Western tradition, partly because of different notions of time. So because time is linear here, history is understood in one way. And because time is circular in many Eastern traditions, history is understood, if at all they understand it, in a very different way. And so, and especially the older a personality gets, the farther in time they go from us, it's amazing how much mythology grows around their lives. And then often it becomes more and more difficult to extricate what we might call historical elements from our today's understanding from what might seem to be mythological elements. But people who study Shankara's life, they have no problem. And you see, you go further back in history, you could think of Krishna, Rama. It becomes so much miraculous from the sensibilities of a 21st century mind that then some people even wonder, were they really historical? Is it really possible? Now, not to put too fine a point on it, but just to recognize that not every incident is meant to be taken literally. Oftentimes, many of these incidents are very metaphorical, symbolical. And so, in other words, if they want to show how powerful a personality is born, sometimes that expression of that power can be very poetic. You'd find some very ornamental language in which some of these old books describe it, which seems pretty impossible from a very kind of a logical standpoint. For instance, look at it this way. There is one great book, I think it was in 13th century, called Shankar Digvijaya, which says, when this little child Shankara, I mean, all of us crawl on all fours when we are young, and when he first started taking his steps, he said he stood up and started walking after a few weeks or months. The first step he took, there are 6 schools of orthodox philosophy in the Vedantic tradition. And Shankara belonged to, Vedanta is one of them. And so it's that first 5 steps he took. With every step, the followers of each of those schools started shivering, saying, oh, there's some great one has come who's come to shatter our philosophy now. Now, again, a little child walking and people are trembling. It's very poetic. But the idea is that in this person, a tremendous power is going to be unleashed through his life, through his teachings, and kind of gets expressed that way. Shankara's father passed away when he was very young, and we see it from his life that he became more serious. Again, we find a similarity in the life of Ramakrishna as well, that this very playful, fun-loving childhood, and then suddenly there is this a kind of a transition, you might say, when there is a death in the family. And then in both the cases, Ramakrishna and Shankara, it was their father. They were very young, and then we see that they became more thoughtful. That happens. That can happen in the lives of any of us, and maybe it has already happened in the life of some of us. And so the boy then became more thoughtful. He then once goes and asks his mother, when he was still very young, he was probably just not more than 10 or 11, that he wanted to go and he wanted to be a monk. And his mother said, no mother in India, well, very few mothers in India would willingly say, okay, go and be a monk. Partly because, as many of you are aware, being a monk in those days, to a large extent, and to some extent even today, it means almost like losing a child. The child is no more a part of the family. In the olden days, once someone left the home to become a monk, most of the time family didn't even see that person. The person went north to Benares or to Himalayas and was never heard of again. And so his mother said, no, she didn't. She obviously wasn't happy with the idea. And so he didn't say anything. He didn't want to hurt his mother. And then the story goes that once with his friends, he was swimming in this river, the Purna River, which was very pretty close to their home. And that river had, I think it still has, a few alligators in it. And so one alligator came and caught hold of this boy and started kind of dragging him inside the river. And then his friends started yelling, and then they started shouting. His mother came running, and it was like, well, if an alligator catches you, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. It's the only thing is done. This boy had the presence of mind then. When he saw on the bank his friend shouting, his mother worried, and he told his mother, please give me permission to be a monk, so that at least in my mind, I can feel that, yes, I'm a monk, and then die as a monk. And then his mother was, last wish for son. She said, yes, I would like you to be saved. If you want to be a monk, so be it. And then the story says, as soon as he said yes, somehow the alligator loosened his grip. And the boy swam back safely to this thing. And well, the mother did. Now, that's important. The mother didn't say, oh, come on, I was just kidding. She didn't say that. No, that was the, how, and this is something we can learn today. How people 12 to 1300 years ago, when they said, yes, I said you are going to be a monk, and this boy said yes. And so he leaves home forthwith at that point, just to keep his word. And of course, he wanted to be monk. So he was happy that somehow this thing came about. And then he goes to central India in a river. There's a river called Darbada. On the bank of the river, he meets his teacher. His teacher's name was Govindapada. And he learns, he studies with him, and becomes, and we read. There's lots of stories. There's no time to go through it. I would encourage you to pick up any good book on Shankara's life. You'll find it very, very inspiring. And it is his teacher then who commands him to write commentaries. Now, there are 3 foundational texts of Vedanta. Those who want to go and study Vedanta from the basic foundational texts, there are 3 foundational texts. In Sanskrit, they're called Prasthanatraya. One is the Gita, the other is the 10 major Upanishads, and then the Brahma Sutras. And because these texts are so old and so archaic in many ways, that a lot of people just don't understand what is being said, which is not so bad as to misunderstand. So a lot of people misunderstand what's being said. And so his teacher asked him to go and write commentaries on these texts. There's another one great incident. One of the things that that scholars in those days did was to go then from place to place and meet with others who held different views and have discussions with them to arrive to find out, exchange of ideas to see, um, to learn. And so that's what Shankara did. So he goes to Banaras, he had discussions with many other scholars, and everywhere he's able to share with them his understanding of Vedanta. There's one very beautiful incident that occurred in Banaras. It seems that those of you who have been to Banaras, it's one of the most ancient cities and considered the holiest place by Hindus in India, because it's very ancient that the lanes are very narrow there in the main part of the town. So Shankara, it seems, was with a few of his students, was going along one of these roads. And from the other side, an outcast, the caste system was very rigid in those days, and someone was considered not even the lowest caste, actually the outcast. That person was coming from the other side. And Shankara had just come from the Ganges, just taken a holy dip in the Ganges and was coming. So with his that danda, the stick, sometimes you have seen the movie, Sanskrit movie, it's very beautifully shown in that one. It says, Duram apasara means move out of the way, move out of the way. He tells that outcast. And that outcast is just standing there in the middle of the road. And he looks at Shankara and says, who are you asking to move out of the way? Do you mean this body? Do you mean this body should move out of the way? And do you think I'm the body? Do you think I'm the mind? And that outcast gives one of the highest teachings of Vedanta, questioning who has to move out of the way? Who am I really? Who are you asking? At that time, Shankara realizes that it is Shiva. Shiva is the presiding deity of Benares, that he himself had appeared as an outcast to teach him. And Shankara there, the great, much respected philosopher, he bends down, touches the feet of this outcast and takes the dust off his feet. And then that Shankara, Shiva, reveals himself to him. Again, amazing, amazing. There is so much to learn from this little incident. That is that, first of all, caste distinctions are no barriers for the highest knowledge. Shiva taught that the greatest knowledge can come even from someone who is in the social ladder is seen as very inferior. And therefore, we should be prepared to learn from anyone and everyone. We never know. In fact, in India, in Hindi, there is a saying, "Na jane kitne rangon mein Bhagwan छिपा hua hai." We never know in how many forms, in how many ways God is hidden. So some of these biases and prejudices that we have, we know there are some people we respect, and there are some people we are like, well, this person doesn't know anything. This person doesn't deserve any respect. We never know. If it's true that God is present in the heart of everyone and everything and every animal and even nature, then God might have a message for us through any of all these living or non-living entities. So if we are prepared to learn, we have always to be alert to see something that is so needed for our life, so needed for our improvement, when come to us from a very unexpected source at a very unexpected time. And if you're not ready, if you're not alert, we'll miss the teaching. We will just miss it. And so this one incident has a lot of message packed into it. Then Shankara went further up in the Himalayas in a place called Badri, and that's where he wrote all of his commentaries. There is an incident mentioned that he meets Vyasa, the great teacher Vyasa there. And Vyasa, it seems, had asked him to write a commentary on the Brahma Sutras, which were composed by Vyasa. So the Brahma Sutras are also called Vyasa Sutras. And according to the original dispensation, if you like, Shankara was to live only for 16 years. But this commentary had to be written, so Vyasa said he extended his life by another 16 years. So he lived for 32 years. He had four major disciples named Sureshwaracharya, Padmapada, Hastamalaka, and Totaka. And he made these four disciples heads of the four monasteries in four corners of India. about Padmapada. Padmapada literally means lotus feet. The story is told, again, part mythological, part historical, but again, has a point to make. And that was this, that Shankara was walking along on a small lake, and he saw this boy on the other side of that lake. It wasn't a big lake, so it was pretty, not like Lake Michigan. Uh, he saw him walking, and he called this boy towards himself. Come here quickly, he said. And this boy, rather than having to go around that lake, which would have taken a long time, he said, my teacher wants me, I must go, and started coming straight on the water. And it seems that every step he took on the water, a lotus sprung from water, and he could put his feet onto it. Now, again, this would we would say, well, this seems very impossible. The point here is this, that where there is faith, it just shows the tremendous amount of faith and trust in one's guru, that without considering any of the factors which might have endangered his own life, he chose to come, and then he was protected. That's the message that comes. So many of these disciples, you have lots of very instructive incidents in their lives which teach us a lot about Shankaracharya. One of the things that he had promised his mother, he was the only child, and his father, as I said, had passed away when he was very young. And one of the things, before he left home as a child, his mother, of course, was sad that he was leaving, and he had promised his mother that whenever you feel like meeting me, I will be here. And I'll definitely be. And mother was more concerned also that I would like you to be here at the time of my passing. And then we see that he did. When it's time for mother's passing came, he was present there. In fact, we read in Shankara's life that according to the tradition, monastics are not, they don't do any of these the family sacraments. The monastics don't perform the funeral ceremonies, for instance, the cremation. That's done by priests. Now, because Shankaracharya had come from that very orthodox section of the community, and because he had become a monk, and many of these ritualists, they did not so much recognize monastic life as a valid form. By valid form, I mean, because when one became a monk, one stopped doing rituals. And that didn't make ritualists happy. And so because Shankara had stopped doing these rituals connected with his own Brahmin caste, because a monk is considered beyond all castes, so these ritualists were so angry that they refused to do the cremation ceremonies for his mother. And he as a monk was not allowed to do it. And so we read an interesting thing, the hut in which his mother was staying, he just goes and sets fire to the hut itself, saying the prayers for his mother, so that he was there for her till the end, and he found a way to overcome some of the resistance and indifference of these very ultra-orthodox among his own community members. We read that at the age of 32, he is sometimes what is called Mahaprasthana. The last that many people saw him was that he just walked right into the Himalayas. So the last place where he was seen was very close to where the present day Kedar. Yes, there is a temple of Shiva in the Himalayas called in Kedarnath. So very close to that place, that was the last he was seen. They saw him just walking into the Himalayas and going. So it's called Mahaprasthana. So he didn't, again, how he died, this is the way the books describe it, in order to show that he was not an ordinary human being. To conclude, I would encourage, if those of you have not seen it, there was in the, I think probably in the 70s or 80s, there was a movie on Shankara's life, the Sanskrit movie, which have got even a national award in India. Um, it may not be too difficult to find it. If you haven't seen it, you can just try to get a copy. It has some good English subtitles, and it's very well done. And in that movie, it was very, as you can see from the light, it was very symbolical uh, picturization. So they had two companions in that movie for Shankara. And the companions are the one only he could see. One of them was named Death, and the other was named Wisdom. And so they always accompany Shankara. And the idea is that he, as an enlightened being, had conquered death and had made wisdom his permanent friend. And so that's why they accompany him throughout. And it's very, very well done movie. So I would encourage you to see that. Also about Shankara's commentaries. Commentaries, of course, are in Sanskrit. Um, the beauty of Shankara's commentary is just the simplicity of his language. In fact, even those who want to study Sanskrit, when you study Shankara's commentaries, you can study Sanskrit as well as Vedanta. It's like two birds in one shot, if you like, because that's somehow the beauty of the greatest of teachers, that they are able to share this highest wisdom in a simplest language. And you see that. You see the parables of Jesus, the stories that the Buddha told, the conversations of Ramakrishna. The language is so simple. So great teachers make difficult things simple. Ordinary teachers make simple things more complicated. And you see that. And so Shankara's commentaries, even if one wants to just appreciate language, and if you know if you have a little background in Sanskrit, and you read Shankara's this thing, it's so, just the joy of language. That how, one thing is, and this one of the Swamis, very elderly Swamis told me years ago, that simplicity of language, whether in writing or speaking, is an expression of the simplicity of the mind. The more complicated we are inside, the more complicated our view of life will be, and the more complicated our solutions to life will be. But the more simple, I hope you understand what I mean by simple. It's not just kind of external show of simplicity, but just this kind of a non-crooked ways of thinking, just straightforward ways of thinking. We will see that that will automatically get expressed in our language, in our writing, in our expression, in our conversation. And that is something that we find very much in Shankara's life. So the ideal of oneness and universality that we find accepted today all over the world, and certainly in the Vedanta tradition, is a direct or indirect influence of Shankara we find on these great ideals toward most people, most thinking people today are able to appreciate the value of universality, the value of oneness. And Shankara has contributed to that in a great way. Many people do believe, they look upon Swami Vivekananda. Again, this is a matter of faith, it's a matter of, that's how the devotees see it. They see Swami Vivekananda as an incarnation of Shankaracharya. Again, as I said, these labels are very subjective. But when we find different personalities at different points in history with some resemblance, then there is a natural human tendency to connect them in some way. Whichever way we try to understand it, it's not so much the labels that matter, but to make an independent study of these lives and their teachings and see what relevance they have to the times in which we live, what relevance they have to every one of us personally in our own specific life context, and then learn. That's basically it. We must improve where we can we must change if we must, and we can pray if we can do neither of these two. So change, improve, or must. Because praying is a way of changing, but it's an internal way. So we must do the best we can with the resources available to us, with the talents, knowledge, energy available to us. But there will be things, there will be times when we find our talents, our resources are not enough. And that is when people who believe in a higher power, higher truth, higher being turn to help. So all of these things, whether you change, improve, and pray, are very important parts of our spiritual life. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. This Wednesday, instead of the Gita class, we have a special lecture by Swami Yuktatmananda, who is the head of the Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center in New York. He'll be with us and he'll speak on steadfastness in spiritual life. That will be on Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. So all of you are welcome for that. Next Sunday, we'll have Antar Yoga. As always, we'll have two of our members doing the readings. We'll have a lot of music. And we will also have a birthday celebration for everyone born in the month of May. So all of you are welcome, especially those who are born in the month of May. Bring all of your friends, neighbors, and whoever there are who are born in the month of May. Yeah. And then on Tuesday and Saturday, we'll continue with our study of, our Arati and meditation in the evening at 6 o'clock. Let's conclude with a prayer on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.